My sister told 200 guests I was obsessed with her husband. His reaction made her collapse. My sister Valerie and I were never close growing up. She was the golden child, the pretty one, the one who got the bedroom with the bigger window. I was just Reese, the younger sister who tagged along. When I turned 22, I moved 3 states away for work, and honestly, the distance helped our relationship more than anything else ever did. We started texting regularly, having actual conversations, and for the first time in my life, I thought maybe we could be real sisters. Then she met Drew. Drew was a guy I had gone on exactly 2 dates with back in college. 2 awkward coffee dates where we realized we had zero chemistry and mutually ghosted each other. When Valerie told me she was dating someone named Drew and showed me his picture, I laughed and told her about our failed attempt at romance years ago. She got quiet on the phone. I assured her it meant nothing, that I barely remembered the guy, and she seemed to accept it. They got engaged 8 months later, and Valerie asked me to be her maid of honor. I was genuinely touched. I took time off work, flew home for every event, spent way too much money on her bachelorette party, and I did it all happily because I thought we had finally become the sisters I always wanted us to be. A month before the wedding, Valerie called me crying. She said one of her bridesmaids had dropped out due to a family emergency, and now the numbers were uneven. She asked if my best friend Cora could fill in last minute. Cora agreed because she's amazing, and Valerie seemed so grateful. She told me she was doing a champagne and gold color scheme, and sent Cora a link to the exact dress she wanted her to wear. Cora ordered it immediately. The week of the wedding, I flew home and stayed at our parents' house. Valerie was stressed and snippy, but I chalked it up to wedding nerves. The morning of the ceremony, all the bridesmaids met at the venue to get ready together. I walked in with Cora and immediately noticed something was wrong. Every single bridesmaid was wearing a deep burgundy dress. Every single one except Cora, who was standing there in champagne gold, looking like she had walked into the wrong wedding. My stomach dropped. Valerie emerged from the bridal suite in her robe with this look on her face that I can only describe as satisfied. She gasped loudly and said to her maid of honor, her college roommate who had replaced me in the role 2 weeks prior without explanation, "I knew Reese would try something. She's been jealous of me and Drew since the beginning." I asked her what she was talking about. She told the entire room that I had been obsessed with Drew for years, that I had tried to break them up multiple times, and that she suspected I had deliberately put Cora in the wrong dress to cause drama on her big day. I stood there frozen while Cora pulled out her phone and showed everyone the text thread with Valerie, the link to the champagne dress, and Valerie's message saying, "This is perfect. Order it ASAP." The room went silent. Valerie's face twisted and she started screaming that I must have faked the texts somehow, that I was always jealous of her, that I wanted her life. Her college roommate tried to calm her down, but Valerie shoved her away and pointed at me saying that I had probably slept with Drew, and this was all part of my plan. That's when Drew walked in. He had heard the screaming from the hallway where the groomsmen were getting ready. He looked at Valerie and asked her what was going on. She ran to him crying, telling him that I was trying to ruin everything, that I had always been in love with him. Drew looked at her, then at me, then back at her. He said he had told her 100 times that nothing ever happened between us, that we went on 2 bad dates 5 years ago, and that he was getting really tired of her constantly bringing it up. He said she had made him block me on social media, had gone through his phone weekly looking for messages from me, and had accused him of thinking about me during intimate moments. The room was dead silent. Valerie started crying harder, saying she just loved him so much and was scared of losing him. Drew took a step back from her. He told her he couldn't do this anymore, that he had ignored the red flags for too long because he thought she would calm down after the wedding. He said he was sorry, but he couldn't marry someone who trusted him this little. He walked out. Valerie collapsed onto the floor sobbing while her bridesmaids stood around looking helpless. I grabbed Cora's hand and we left. We drove to a diner and ordered pancakes, and I sat there in my burgundy bridesmaid dress eating breakfast at 10 a.m. on what was supposed to be my sister's wedding day. My phone blew up for hours with calls from my parents, from Valerie, from relatives demanding to know what happened. I turned it off and ordered more coffee. 3 months later, I heard through my mom that Valerie had started therapy. She reached out to me last week asking to meet for lunch. She said she had something important to tell me about Drew, something I deserved to know from the beginning. I haven't decided if I'm going yet. I stare at Valerie's text message for the 10th time, reading the words until they start to blur together on my phone screen. "I have something important to tell you about Drew, something you deserve to know from the beginning." My stomach twists into knots because I can't imagine what she could possibly reveal. Now that would actually matter. Drew walked out of that wedding 3 months ago, and honestly, I thought that was the end of it. I set my phone down on my kitchen counter and pick it up again 30 seconds later to reread the message. The words don't change. I grab my phone and pull up Cora's number, pressing call before I can talk myself out of it. She answers on the second ring, and I don't even say hello before launching into it, telling her about Valerie's message and how my hands won't stop shaking. Cora's response is immediate and firm. She tells me I absolutely should not meet Valerie alone, that this could be another setup or manipulation. We talk for 20 minutes, going in circles about whether I should even respond, and finally we agree that if I decide to do this, she's coming with me as backup. I thank her and hang up, then spend the rest of the evening staring at my phone and trying to figure out what Valerie could possibly need to tell me. I sleep terribly that night, waking up every few hours to check if Valerie has sent another message. She hasn't. The next day at work drags on forever, and I can barely focus on the spreadsheets in front of me because my brain keeps spinning through possibilities. That evening, I text Cora again, and we talk through it one more time. She reminds me that I don't owe Valerie anything, that I can just ignore the message and move on with my life. But something about the way Valerie worded it, the deserve to know from the beginning part, makes me think maybe this is actually important. After 2 days of thinking it over and driving myself crazy with speculation, I finally text Valerie back. I tell her I'll meet her for lunch at a neutral location, a cafe called Riverside that's halfway between our parents' house and my apartment. I add that I'm bringing Cora and she can take it or leave it. I hit send before I can second-guess myself, and then immediately want to throw my phone across the room. My phone buzzes less than 5 minutes later with Valerie's response. She agrees to my terms without any argument or pushback. I stare at her message in complete shock because the old Valerie, the one from before the wedding disaster, would have absolutely demanded it be just the two of us so she could control the conversation and the narrative. This quick agreement to let Cora come makes me nervous in a completely different way. Like maybe Valerie has actually changed. Or maybe this is some new kind of manipulation I haven't figured out yet. I forward the text thread to Cora and she responds with 3 question marks, clearly just as surprised as I am. We agree to meet at my apartment an hour before the lunch so we can drive over together. The morning of the lunch arrives and I wake up feeling like I might throw up. I try to eat breakfast but can only manage half a piece of toast before my stomach rebels. Cora shows up at my door right on time, takes one look at my face and pulls me into a hug. She tells me we can still cancel, that we can get in her car right now and drive to the beach instead and forget this whole thing. But I shake my head and grab my jacket because I need to know what Valerie wants to tell me, even if it's going to mess me up all over again. Cora drives because my hands are shaking too much to be safe behind the wheel. She keeps up a steady stream of conversation during the 20-minute drive, talking about her job and her annoying coworker, and anything except the lunch we're heading toward. Every few minutes she reminds me that we can leave anytime I want, that I'm in control of this situation. We arrive at Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early and grab a table in the back corner where I can see the door. I order a coffee I don't drink and Cora gets a tea she doesn't touch either. We sit there in tense silence, watching every person who walks through the door. When Valerie finally walks in right at noon, I barely recognize her at first. She's lost at least 15 pounds since the wedding, maybe more, and she looks completely exhausted. Her face is thinner, her clothes hang loose on her frame, and there are dark circles under her eyes that makeup can't quite hide. She spots us immediately and walks over slowly, like she's not sure if we're going to get up and leave. She sits down in the empty chair across from me without ordering anything. Her hands are shaking as she folds them on the table in front of her. She opens her mouth twice before any words come out, and when they do, her voice is shaking almost as badly as her hands. She apologizes for everything that happened at the wedding, for the accusations and the dress setup and the complete nightmare she put me through. She tells me her therapist Madison has been helping her understand that she had an obsessive jealousy problem that completely destroyed her relationship with Drew and damaged her relationship with me. I sit there without saying anything, just listening and trying to process the fact that my sister is actually taking responsibility for her actions. Valerie keeps talking, explaining that Drew had told her about our 2 college dates on their second date together, and she'd been paranoid about it ever since. She admits that she made him block me on social media, that she checked his phone constantly looking for messages from me, that she accused him of thinking about me during their most private moments. Her voice cracks when she talks about how she drove him away with her constant suspicion and accusations. She tells me that the dress setup wasn't a last-minute panic or wedding day stress. It was a planned sabotage that she'd been working on for weeks. She wanted to prove to everyone, especially to Drew, that I was trying to ruin her wedding. She thought if she could make me look bad in front of all those people, Drew would finally see that I was the real problem in their relationship, and not her jealousy. She actually believed that humiliating me would somehow fix everything between them. Valerie starts crying now, real tears streaming down her face, and I feel Cora squeeze my hand under the table hard enough that it almost hurts. I take a deep breath and ask Valerie the question that's been burning in my mind since I got her text. I ask her why she's telling me all this now and what the important information about Drew actually is, because so far she hasn't told me anything I didn't already know or couldn't have guessed. Valerie takes a deep breath and wipes her eyes with a napkin that's already falling apart in her hands. She tells me that Drew had actually tried multiple times to invite me to hang out with them as a couple. He wanted to prove there was nothing between us, wanted to show her that we could all be normal together. But every single time he suggested it, she refused and accused him of wanting to cheat. She says she would scream at him for hours after he brought it up, telling him he was trying to humiliate her by forcing her to watch him flirt with me. Drew would try to explain that wasn't his intention at all, that he just wanted her to see how platonic our history was, but she couldn't hear it. She was so deep in her jealousy that any mention of my name sent her into a panic. She shifts in her seat and starts talking faster, like she needs to get it all out before she loses her nerve. She reveals that Drew had suggested couples therapy 6 months before the wedding. He was worried about her jealousy and thought a professional could help them work through it together. But Valerie refused and told him he was the one with the problem for not understanding her feelings. She says she actually convinced herself that his suggestion of therapy meant he was planning to leave her for me. In her mind, therapy was just his way of preparing her for the breakup, so he wouldn't feel guilty when he ran off with me. She admits now that this made no sense, but at the time it felt completely real and logical to her. Drew tried to explain that therapy would help them both, that it wasn't about blame, but she shut down every conversation about it. The waitress comes by to refill our water glasses, and Valerie stops talking until she walks away. Then she looks directly at me and says, "The important information she wanted to tell me is that Drew never had any romantic feelings for me whatsoever. Not even a tiny bit." She says her therapist helped her realize she invented an entire story in her head that had no basis in reality. Drew never looked at me in any special way, never mentioned me except when she brought me up, never gave her any actual reason to think he wanted me. She created this whole fantasy where I was secretly in love with him, and he was secretly in love with me, and she was the only one who could see the truth. I sit there completely stunned because I thought she was going to reveal some actual secret. I thought maybe Drew had said something to someone or there was some incident I didn't know about. But this is just her confirming what I already knew, what everyone at that wedding already knew. I tell her I could have told her that myself since I was there for those 2 awkward coffee dates where we talked about economics homework and realized we had nothing in common. I remind her that I barely remembered him when she first showed me his picture, that I had to think for a minute to even place who he was. Valerie nods and says she knows that now. But she spent years building up this fantasy where I was secretly in love with Drew and trying to steal him from her. She says she even convinced herself that I moved 3 states away specifically to make Drew miss me. In her mind, my job opportunity and my desire for independence didn't matter. Everything I did was part of some elaborate plan to make Drew realize he wanted me instead of her. She would lie awake at night imagining scenarios where Drew would suddenly remember our coffee dates and realize I was his soulmate. She says her therapist has helped her understand that she was projecting her own insecurities onto me and Drew, creating a villain in her story so she didn't have to face her real fears about not being good enough. Cora finally speaks up, her voice sharp in a way I rarely hear from her. She asks Valerie why she replaced Kira as maid of honor 2 weeks before the wedding. The question hangs in the air and I realize I'd almost forgotten about that detail and everything else that happened. Valerie looks down at the table and her face goes red with shame. She admits she was afraid Kira would defend me when she executed her dress sabotage plan. Kira had been her college roommate and knew both of us pretty well, and Valerie was worried Kira would speak up and ruin the whole setup. So she made up some story about needing someone who understood her vision better, and demoted Kira to regular bridesmaid status. She says Kira was hurt and confused but accepted it because she didn't want to cause drama before the wedding. I feel anger rising in my chest like hot water filling up a container. This wasn't a moment of wedding day panic or stress-induced paranoia. Valerie had been planning to humiliate me for weeks, maybe months. She had carefully orchestrated the dress colors, the timing, the setup with Cora, all of it. She had replaced her maid of honor specifically to make sure no one would defend me when she made her accusations in front of everyone. Every detail was calculated and cruel, designed to make me look like the villain in her made-up story. I think about all the phone calls leading up to the wedding where she sounded so grateful for my help, so happy that we were getting closer as sisters. All of that was fake while she was planning this elaborate trap. Valerie reaches across the table trying to take my hand, but I pull it away before she can touch me. She starts crying harder, and the tears are running down her face faster than she can wipe them away. She says she understands if I never forgive her, that she wouldn't forgive herself if she were in my position. But she needed me to know the truth about how sick her thinking had become. She says her therapist Madison has been helping her understand that she needs to take full responsibility for her actions, not just apologize and expect everything to be okay. She knows she destroyed our relationship and destroyed her relationship with Drew, and it was all because of problems that existed only in her head. I ask her if she's been in contact with Drew at all since the wedding. My voice sounds cold even to my own ears. Valerie shakes her head and more tears fall onto the table between us. She says Drew blocked her number the same day he walked out, and she found out through a mutual friend that he moved to a different city about a month later. She doesn't blame him for wanting nothing to do with her. She says she put him through hell for their entire relationship, accusing him of things he never did, controlling who he could talk to, checking his phone like a detective looking for evidence of a crime that never happened. She admits that walking out of that wedding was probably the best decision he ever made, even though it destroyed her at the time. Cora asks the question I'm too angry to voice myself. She wants to know if Valerie has apologized to Drew for what she put him through. Valerie wipes her face with her sleeve and nods slowly. She says she wrote him a letter through her therapist about a month ago. Madison helped her write something that took responsibility without making excuses or asking for anything in return. She sent it to his new address, but she has no idea if he ever read it. She says she hopes he did because he deserves to know that none of it was his fault, that he did nothing wrong, but she's not expecting or wanting a response. She just needed him to know that she understands now how badly she treated him. I push my chair back from the table and stand up, my legs feeling shaky after sitting through Valerie's confession. I tell her I need time to process everything she's told me, and I'm not ready to say I forgive her, or that we can rebuild our relationship. The words come out flat and tired because I've been holding them in for the past hour while she cried and explained her therapy breakthroughs. Valerie nods and wipes her face with a napkin that's already soaked through. She says she expected that, but she hopes someday I might be willing to try. Her voice cracks on the last word, and part of me wants to comfort her, but a bigger part remembers standing in that bridal suite while she accused me of sleeping with Drew in front of everyone. Cora stands up next to me and puts her hand on my shoulder, a silent reminder that we're leaving now. As we're getting up to leave, Valerie mentions that she's also apologized to Cora for setting her up with the wrong dress. She looks at Cora with red, swollen eyes and says she knows it doesn't fix anything, but she wanted Cora to know she was sorry. Cora accepts the apology but tells Valerie it's going to take more than sorry to fix what she did to both of us. Her tone is polite but cold, and I'm grateful she's here because I don't think I could handle this conversation alone. We walk out of the cafe into bright afternoon sunlight that feels wrong for how heavy everything feels. On the drive home, Cora and I sit in silence for 20 minutes before I finally break down crying. The tears come suddenly and I can't stop them. Big, ugly sobs that make my whole body shake. Cora pulls over into a gas station parking lot and just sits with me while I cry into my hands. I'm not even sure if I'm crying from anger, relief, or grief for the sister relationship I thought we were building. Maybe it's all three mixed together into something I don't have words for. Cora doesn't try to make me stop or tell me it's going to be okay. She just hands me tissues from the glove box and waits until I can breathe normally again. When I finally calm down enough to talk, I tell her I don't know what to do with all of this information. Knowing that Valerie planned everything, that she deliberately set up that dress situation to humiliate me, makes it worse somehow. Cora says we don't have to figure it out right now. We can just go home and watch bad TV and eat ice cream. That sounds perfect, so I nod and she pulls back onto the road. That evening, my mom calls asking how the lunch went because Valerie told her we met. I give her a brief summary while sitting on my couch with a pint of chocolate ice cream. Mom listens without interrupting, and when I finish, she lets out a long sigh. She admits she and Dad have been worried about Valerie's mental health for years, but didn't know how to address it. This surprises me because my parents never talked about Valerie having problems when we were growing up. Mom says they noticed things but hoped she would outgrow them, which clearly didn't happen. I ask her what kind of things they noticed, and there's a long pause before she answers. Mom reveals that Valerie had similar jealousy issues with her high school boyfriend, accusing his female friends of trying to steal him. She would call him constantly to check where he was and who he was with. They thought she'd grown out of it, but clearly the problems went deeper than they realized. I sit there holding my phone and wondering how I never knew any of this. Mom says they didn't want to label Valerie or make her feel bad about herself, so they just encouraged the boyfriend to be patient with her. He eventually broke up with her anyway because the jealousy was too much. I tell Mom I wish someone had warned Drew about this pattern before he got engaged to her. Mom's voice gets quiet and she says they thought about it but didn't want to interfere in Valerie's relationship. She sounds guilty now, like she's realizing they should have said something. We talk for another 15 minutes before I tell her I need to go. After we hang up, I sit in the dark thinking about how many people saw warning signs and said nothing. 2 weeks after the lunch, I get a text from Blake Goodman, Drew's best friend from the wedding. I recognize his name from the guest list and remember seeing him standing with the groomsmen that morning. He asks if we can talk because Drew wanted to reach out to me, but wasn't sure if it would be appropriate. My first thought is that this is weird, but then I remember Drew was a victim in all of this too. I text back saying sure, we can talk. Blake suggests meeting for coffee the next day at a place near my apartment. I agree to meet Blake for coffee, curious about what Drew wants to say. The next afternoon, I walk into a small coffee shop and find Blake already sitting at a corner table. He's tall with dark hair and looks tired, like he hasn't been sleeping well. We shake hands and I sit down across from him. Blake explains that Drew felt terrible that I got caught up in Valerie's accusations and wanted to apologize for not defending me more strongly that day. He says Drew has been beating himself up about it for months, replaying that morning over and over. I tell Blake that Drew doesn't owe me an apology because he was dealing with his own crisis in that moment. Blake nods but says Drew still wants me to know he wishes he had handled things differently. He pulls out his phone and shows me a text from Drew that basically says the same thing. Blake tells me that Drew had actually been planning to call off the wedding the week before, but his parents convinced him to try one more time. They told him every couple has problems and marriage would make things better. Drew knew that was wrong, but he loved Valerie and wanted to believe she would change. Blake says Drew regrets not trusting his instincts and walking away sooner. He thinks if he had ended things privately before the wedding, I wouldn't have been dragged into the mess. I appreciate that Drew is thinking about me, but I tell Blake that Valerie would have found another way to blame me for the breakup. Her problems weren't really about me or Drew. They were about whatever was going on in her own head. I ask Blake if Drew knew about the dress setup plan, and Blake says absolutely not. Drew was genuinely shocked when he walked into that room and heard what Valerie was saying about me. Blake says Drew had no idea Valerie had sent Cora the wrong dress color on purpose. He thought it was an honest mistake until he saw how satisfied Valerie looked when she started making accusations. That's when everything clicked for him, and he realized how far gone she really was. Blake leans back in his chair and says, Drew spent the whole morning getting ready thinking about how to bring up his concerns about the relationship one more time. He never imagined he'd walk in on a planned attack. I believe Blake because Drew's face that morning showed real confusion and horror. Blake gives me Drew's new number and says Drew would like to apologize directly if I'm open to it. He writes it down on a napkin and slides it across the table. I take the number but tell Blake, part of me wants to talk to Drew and clear the air, but another part thinks it might be better to just let everything stay in the past. Blake says he understands and tells me to take my time. We finish our coffee and talk about other things for a while, just normal conversation about work and life. It's nice to have a casual chat that isn't about wedding drama or family problems. When we leave the coffee shop, Blake gives me a quick hug and says he hopes I'm doing okay. I tell him I'm working on it, which feels like the most honest answer I can give. I spend the next month throwing myself into work, taking on extra projects that keep my brain too busy to spiral. Cora checks in on me every few days, and one Friday she shows up at my apartment with 2 packed bags and announces we're going to the beach for the weekend. I don't argue because I know she's right that I need to get away from everything. We drive 3 hours to a small beach town and rent a cheap motel room that smells like salt water and old carpet. We spend Saturday walking along the shore, and Cora lets me talk through everything that happened without interrupting or trying to fix it. I tell her how weird it feels that my sister's mental health crisis became the defining moment of my year, how I'm angry at Valerie but also sad for her, how I don't know if I'll ever trust her again even if she gets better. Cora listens and nods and occasionally throws shells into the waves. Sunday morning, we sit on the beach eating donuts and watching the sunrise, and I realize this is the first time in weeks that my chest doesn't feel tight. When we drive home that afternoon, I feel like maybe I can actually move forward instead of just surviving. The next week, I'm sitting at my desk staring at Drew's number that Blake gave me. I've picked up my phone a dozen times and put it back down because I don't know what I'd even say to him. But then I think about how he walked out of that wedding and probably spent months dealing with his own mess, and maybe we both deserve to clear the air. I send him a text that just says it's me and asks if he wants to talk sometime. He responds within an hour saying yes and gives me his new number since he changed it after everything happened. We set up a time for Thursday evening, and I spend the next 3 days being nervous about a phone call with someone I barely know. When Thursday comes, I almost cancel 5 times, but at 7 o'clock I dial his number and he picks up on the second ring. The first few minutes are so awkward that I consider faking bad reception and hanging up, but then Drew says he's been wanting to apologize to me for months, and suddenly the conversation gets easier. He tells me he feels terrible that I got dragged into Valerie's accusations, that he should have defended me more strongly in that moment instead of just defending himself. I can hear genuine guilt in his voice, and it makes me feel less alone in this whole situation. Drew starts explaining how he was ignored so many red flags because Valerie was perfect in every other way. He says she was loving and supportive and funny, and he convinced himself that her jealousy was just insecurity that would fade once they got married, and she felt more secure in the relationship. He thought if he just proved his loyalty enough times, blocked me on social media like she asked, let her check his phone whenever she wanted, that eventually she'd trust him. He admits now that he was wrong to think marriage would fix her problems, and he wishes he'd recognized the patterns earlier. I listened to him talk about checking in with her constantly when he was out with friends, about avoiding female coworkers. Because it upset her, about the time she accused him of thinking about me during sex, and he actually tried to convince her that wasn't true, instead of recognizing how messed up the accusation was. He sounds exhausted just recounting it all, and I start to understand that he was drowning in that relationship long before the wedding day. I tell Drew he doesn't owe me an apology because he was dealing with his own crisis that morning, and I don't blame him for how he reacted. I explain that I was just collateral damage in Valerie's issues, but he was the actual target of all that jealousy and control. We end up talking for over an hour, and I realize he's actually a really decent person who got caught in a bad situation with someone he loved. He tells me about the guilt he felt leaving Valerie sobbing on the floor, how his parents were furious with him for embarrassing the family, how half their mutual friends took her side because they couldn't believe sweet Valerie would do something so calculated. He moved to a new city 2 months after the wedding disaster because he couldn't handle running into people who knew them as a couple. I find myself feeling protective of him even though we're basically strangers, because I know what it's like to be blamed for Valerie's problems. Drew mentions he started therapy right after the wedding, working through his own trust issues and learning to spot unhealthy relationship patterns before they get that bad. His therapist helped him understand that he'd been in a controlling relationship and didn't even realize it, because Valerie's control came wrapped in love and concern. He says walking out of that wedding was the hardest thing he's ever done, but also the best decision because staying would have destroyed him eventually. I hear real conviction in his voice when he talks about it, like he's finally accepted that leaving was the right choice even though it felt awful. He asks how I'm doing with everything, and I'm honest that I'm still processing it all, still deciding if I want to rebuild a relationship with Valerie or just let it go. Drew doesn't give me advice, but he listens, really listens, and that feels more valuable than any advice could be. We end the call agreeing to stay in touch as friends, which feels strange considering he's my sister's ex, and we went on 2 terrible dates years ago, but it also feels healthy and honest. There's something freeing about talking to someone who understands exactly what Valerie's jealousy looks like from the inside. After we hang up, I sit on my couch for a while thinking about how weird life is, how the wedding disaster connected me to someone I never would have known otherwise. I save his new number in my phone under just Drew. No last name, no context, just a person who gets it. 3 months pass and I'm getting coffee before work when my phone buzzes with a text from Valerie. She's asking if I'd be willing to meet again, saying she's made real progress in therapy and wants to share some things she's learned about herself. I stare at the message while my coffee gets cold, trying to figure out how I feel about seeing her again. Part of me wants to ignore it and keep living my life without her drama, but another part is curious about what she wants to say. I text Cora asking what she thinks, and Cora says I should do whatever feels right for me, that she'll support either decision. I spend 2 days thinking about it before I finally respond to Valerie saying yes, I'll meet her. But this time I want to do it alone without Cora there. I need to know if Valerie and I can have a real conversation without a buffer. We agree to meet at the same cafe where we had lunch before, and when I walk in, Valerie is already there at a corner table. She looks different, healthier somehow, like she's been sleeping through the night and eating regular meals. Her hair is pulled back and she's wearing minimal makeup, nothing like the perfectly put-together version of her I grew up with. I sit down across from her and order tea, and we make awkward small talk for a few minutes about the weather and work. Then Valerie takes a deep breath and tells me she's been diagnosed with something called obsessive-compulsive disorder, with relationship-focused obsessions. She explains that her therapist, Madison, helped her understand that the intrusive thoughts about me and Drew weren't rational jealousy. They were a symptom of OCD that made her brain get stuck on fears of abandonment and betrayal. She's on medication now and learning coping strategies in therapy, and she says it's like someone turned down the volume on the constant anxious noise in her head. Valerie starts explaining that her jealousy was never really about me or Drew specifically. It was about this deep terror of being abandoned that came from our childhood. She talks about how we were always compared to each other, how she felt like she had to be perfect to be loved, because any flaw meant was chosen over her. She says she internalized this idea that love was conditional and could be stolen away if someone better came along, so she tried to control everything to prevent that from happening. I sit there listening and realizing that while I spent our childhood feeling invisible next to her, she spent it feeling like she was one mistake away from losing everything. We both grew up in the same house but experienced completely different versions of our family, and neither of us knew what the other was going through. I take a breath and tell Valerie that I need to share something too, that growing up I always felt like I was in her shadow. She looks confused, so I explain how I was just the younger sister who wasn't as pretty or accomplished, how I felt invisible next to her. Valerie's face changes and she says she had no idea I felt that way, that she always thought I had it easier because there was less pressure on me. We sit there for a long time talking about our childhood in a way we never have before, both of us realizing we spent years misunderstanding each other's experience. She tells me about feeling like she had to be perfect, or she'd lose our parents' love, and I tell her about feeling like nothing I did mattered because she'd already done it better. It's the first truly honest conversation we've ever had about being sisters. When we're getting ready to leave the cafe, Valerie asks if there's anything she can do to make up for everything beyond just saying sorry. I think about it for a minute and tell her the most important thing is that she keeps going to therapy and working on her mental health, not just for me, but for herself. She nods and says, Madison has been helping her understand that her problems go deeper than just the wedding situation. We walk out to the parking lot together and stand by our cars for a few minutes, just talking about normal things like work and the weather. Before we drive away, Valerie suggests that maybe we could try rebuilding our relationship slowly, like meeting for coffee once a month where we can practice talking to each other honestly. I agree and tell her there's no pressure to become best friends overnight, we're just committing to try. She looks relieved and gives me a quick hug before getting in her car. I drive home feeling lighter than I have in months, like maybe there's a chance for us after all. A few days later, I'm at my parents' house for Sunday dinner when my Uncle Otto pulls me aside in the kitchen. He tells me he's proud of me for being willing to give Valerie another chance while still keeping healthy boundaries. Otto has always been the wise one in our family, the person everyone goes to for advice about relationships and life problems. He says what I'm doing is what real forgiveness looks like, that it's not about pretending nothing happened, but about choosing to move forward anyway. I tell him I'm scared Valerie might fall back into old patterns, and he reminds me that's why the boundaries matter, that I can support her growth without letting her hurt me again. We rejoin everyone in the dining room, and I notice my parents watching Valerie and me interact with this hopeful look on their faces, like they're afraid to believe things might actually get better between us. 6 months pass, and I get invited to a small family dinner at my parents' house. When I arrive, Valerie is already there helping Mom set the table. We say hi to each other and fall into easy conversation about a TV show we both watch. It's not perfect, and there are still some awkward moments, but it feels genuine in a way our relationship never did before. We all sit down to eat, and Dad asks Valerie about her new job, and she talks about it without the fake enthusiasm she used to have when trying to prove everything was perfect. Later, when we're clearing dishes, Mom pulls me into the hallway and says she's so relieved to see Valerie and me talking and laughing together. I can tell she was worried we'd never speak again after the wedding disaster. Throughout the evening, I catch myself actually enjoying Valerie's company. Not forcing it or pretending, but genuinely finding her funny and interesting. When I'm leaving, Valerie walks me to my car and tells me she started volunteering with a mental health advocacy group. She explains that she's been sharing her story at their meetings to help other people recognize obsessive relationship patterns before they destroy their lives. I'm surprised and impressed that she's turned her worst moment into something meaningful, that she's using what happened to help others. She says Madison encouraged her to find a way to give back, and this felt right. I tell her I think that's really brave, and she smiles in a way that looks different from her old smile, more real somehow. A week later, I'm at work when my phone buzzes with a text from Drew. I haven't heard from him in months, so I'm curious what he wants. The message says he started dating someone new and it's going really well, that he wanted to thank me for being a supportive friend during his healing process. I text back saying I'm genuinely happy for him and asking how he's been. He calls me during my lunch break and we talk for 20 minutes about his life and his new girlfriend. He sounds lighter, like he's finally moved past everything that happened with Valerie. I tell him about Valerie's progress in therapy and the volunteer work she's doing, and he says he's glad she's getting help, but he's not ready to have any contact with her yet. I understand completely and tell him he doesn't owe her anything. Before we hang up, he says he hopes Valerie and I can build something healthy together, that sisters are important. After the call, I sit in my car thinking about how strange it is that Drew and I are friends now when we barely knew each other before all this happened. The wedding disaster connected us in this weird way, both of us victims of Valerie's obsession. That evening, I'm making dinner in my apartment when I start thinking about everything that's happened over the past year. The wedding disaster was one of the most painful experiences of my life, watching my sister accuse me in front of all those people, and then seeing her relationship fall apart. But it also taught me important lessons about boundaries and forgiveness, and the difference between enabling someone and supporting their growth. I learned that you can't fix someone else's mental health problems by ignoring them or making excuses for their behavior. I learned that real love means being honest even when it's hard, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their actions. Valerie and I will never have a perfect sister relationship like the ones you see in movies, but we're building something real and honest. We're learning to talk to each other without the layers of resentment and competition that defined our childhood. It's slow and sometimes awkward, but it feels worth it. A year after the wedding that never happened, Valerie texts asking if I want to take a weekend trip together. Just the two of us, no parents or other family members, a chance to spend real time together. I'm nervous about it, but I agree. Figuring if things get weird, I can always drive home early. We book a spa weekend at a resort 2 hours away and drive up on a Friday afternoon. The first few hours are a little stiff as we settle into the hotel room and figure out how to be around each other for an extended period. But by dinner that night, we're talking easily, sharing stories about work and friends and the random things happening in our lives. On Saturday, we get massages and sit in the hot tub, and Valerie opens up about her therapy sessions in a way she hasn't before. She talks about the work she's doing to understand her fear of abandonment and how it shaped her behavior in relationships. I share my own struggles with feeling invisible, and how moving away helped me build my own identity, separate from being Valerie's little sister. We spend hours by the pool talking about our hopes for the future and our commitment to breaking the unhealthy family patterns we grew up with. Valerie admits she's scared about dating again because she doesn't trust herself to recognize when she's falling into obsessive patterns. I tell her that's what therapy is for, to help her develop those skills. On Sunday morning before we check out, we sit on the balcony drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. Valerie thanks me for giving her another chance, and I tell her I'm glad I did, that I can see how hard she's working to change. As I drive home Sunday afternoon, my car full of spa products and my body relaxed from the weekend, I feel genuinely optimistic about our future as sisters. We've both grown so much over the past year, doing the hard work of understanding ourselves and each other. The wedding day was traumatic, and I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, but it forced us both to confront truths we'd been avoiding our whole lives. Valerie had to face her mental health issues and get real help instead of pretending everything was fine. I had to learn how to set boundaries and stop making myself small to avoid conflict. Sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the most important growth, and I'm grateful we both had the courage to do the hard work of healing. Our relationship will always have scars from what happened, but those scars are part of our story now. They remind us how far we've come and how much we've learned. I turn up the music and roll down the windows, feeling the warm air rush through the car, and I smile thinking about next month's coffee date with Valerie.